Hey, this is Ramon, channel Alpha 4, and my last video on Genesis, on religion, did so well it has no views. So why not do it again? So Genesis 2, and I'm going from my notes. I wrote a really good, I'm going to call it a thesis on this, a really good paper, and it's on my Tumblr, if you can find it. I'm not going to say the name of the page right now. But if you can find my Tumblr, I have it on there. It's really good. But just to let you know, my approach is literary and philosophical when I'm interpreting the Bible. So I am not making claims to be a preacher or a pastor or anything like that. And the whole reason why I'm even doing this Bible study is because I'm trying to learn Spanish, and I'm reading the book in Spanish first, and then I'm reading it in English. So the reread is more of a necessity so I can know what I read. But being that I've read this now 4 times, and this is my 5th time, I believe. Who knows? Maybe more. I'm getting a different understanding of everything. So I want to talk about Genesis 2, and this is just going to be a brief overview because, like I said, I have a much nicer, much longer account of everything broken down section by section on my Tumblr. So Genesis 2 is a priestly older version than Genesis 1. It's an artificial and religious interpretation, but just because it is non-factual doesn't mean that it is untrue, because there are deeper truths inside of the text. Much like how an actor has to find a deeper truth in his performance, or how a strong play or story will tell a deeper truth. Sometimes, if you think about Aesop's fables, or fairy tales, they're very simple stories. Even some of the Disney movies, and I don't mean the Disney fairy tale movies. I mean, like, some of the Disney storytelling and Pixar storytelling. It hits to deeper truths that are not usually touched upon in normal nonfiction storytelling. But Genesis story only shows up in the history of the Israelite religion. It only shows up in post-exile, post-Babylonian exile texts. So it is very heavily influenced by the Mesopotamian myths. It is an alternative version of the creation myth. And in the story, you see an inversion of nature. And the Adam and Eve, the Adam creation is very indicative of this. Adam's creation is death in reverse. So it's first he is dust, then he is a still body, then he is given the breath of life. Well, that is the inverse of death. So first you lose your breath, then you're a still body, and then you decay into dust. So that is literally death in reverse. Let's see. Here we also get the 7-day cycle, which interests me because not every ancient creation story or ancient primitive society has a 7-day cycle. So it's interesting that the ancient Israelites hit on the 7-day cycle pretty much the way that we understand it today. So that is actually really awesome, mathematically and scientifically speaking, that their brains were able to figure that out from a mythological and theological standpoint. Let's see. God in this story is in Genesis 2, as opposed to Genesis 1, where he's creating out of the water, out of the darkness. And later on, there'll be hints about chaos. Here, well, in Genesis 1, there's hints of chaos. Here, there is no primordial water that he's creating out of. Here, he is the progenitor, he is the pre-causal. Um, and I recently came into some insight from actually Catholic Answers about what God is or who God is to a Catholic mindset from a Catholic philosophical standpoint. I'm not going to get into that here, but it's really interesting. But the idea that God exists outside of time and that he's the impetus, the essence, he is being itself, that creation itself is an act of God as in God as being or God as existence is really an interesting idea and something I honestly never even thought of until I reread this and saw some new commentaries on it. Speaking of new commentaries, I've been listening a lot to the Jordan Peterson biblical series and to Steve Glossen's Lakeview podcast. I'm listening to that a lot. Really good religious stuff if you want to take things from a more, either from a more literary standpoint or from a more religious, theological standpoint. I also like the fact that the days in the creation myth in Genesis 2 is very much like the epochs in real geological history. That if you can simply ignore the metaphor of days and just look at the way creation happens, it matches what current scientific theory says about the Precambrian era. So I think that's interesting. If you can if you can just open up your mind and understand that days is a metaphor and take it as just how close to our current understanding, the cooling of the earth, the arrival of water, the life coming in standpoints and coming in phases, and life being wiped out and then life coming back. All of that is in concert with modern understanding, although here in poetic and philosophical language that is completely being unscientific, of course. And it makes me think of the actual creation process and the arrival of the mist. Makes me think of a desert people or even a lone wanderer being surprised by a sudden gush of water out of an underground spring or underground stream. And that to me was beautiful. All right, I'm only going to go for 10 minutes on this, so I have about another page of notes on Genesis 2. So if I get to the 10-minute mark, I'm just going to stop there. Creation seems to be death in reverse, as I said. Adam here is Adama, which is ground, humus, or clay. In the story, the garden is to the east of the storyteller or his audience. So I think that's interesting that even the storyteller has Eden, or the garden, or the first farm, in ancient Mesopotamia, where the actual cradle of civilization was, where the actual, if there was a first farm or first garden, where it would have actually been. I think that's an interesting thing. I don't know if that's some kind of ancient memory that's been passed on orally, or if that was just simple influence from the Babylonian exile. I'm not sure. Then you see God as the good father. He's providing, he's caring, he's giving gifts to his progeny. But the progeny is not satisfied. No pet can satisfy the longing for a mate. Your friends are not enough. You need a partner. And then you see the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. And again, the tree of knowledge here can be understood as wisdom. And wisdom is a Greek abstract, a divinity called Sophia. And Sophia, wisdom, survives into the New Testament understanding of biblical terminology, especially in Christianity. All right, well, that is part 1 of Genesis 2. See you guys in the next video.